I wanted to talk today about you did a video the other day about the fat percentages, the pies and the biscuits.
The idea that, yes, when you're working at a lower intensity, you're burning a high percentage of fat, but the total calorie burn is significantly lower. So it's a bigger portion of a smaller total. Whereas if you work higher.
I think that merits. So the video was great, but
Let's dig a little deeper.
Yeah. So to be crystal clear, where this comes from is really originally, I guess, a bodybuilding concept. It was bodybuilders who were trying to get massive and hold unnatural amounts of muscle on their body
With as little body fat as possible.
And so the idea is, well, if you want to avoid the risk of burning any muscle mass or anything else, if you just want to really target fat only, keep your level of intensity low, so the percentage drawn from body fat is at its highest, and then you're great. And it's valid in a sense in it for those guys who can't really do sprints. They can't run. They have to kind of attack at that low intensity.
You're so enormous that you can't function in that way. Yeah.
And if you're so far away from your body's natural human baseline of muscle mass, if you're just so far over that, it's hanging on to that muscle mass is like
It's a fight. Yeah, it's a struggle. Yeah. It's hard work.
But I think then that's been popularised, and you'll see it on exercise bikes. Like you see in gyms where it'll be like they'll have the fat burning zone
that goes up.
And, it's like, and I've had people say, I've got to be careful. I don't want to go exercise too hard because I'll go out of the fat burning zone, and it's just total rubbish. And I think it's worth deconstructing that thoroughly. So, what I think people have to understand is that on that continuum, as you work more intensely, your percentage of fat burned as a percentage of the calories burned, that decreases. As you work less intensely, that increases. So the ultimate fat burning exercise based on that...
On percentage of calories.
If percentage is the game, then sleeping is the highest fat burned as a percentage of calories. If that's the percentage game, we should all just have naps and get ripped. So it's not.
Sadly.
Yeah, that would be great. And the other thing I point to is, if you look at sprinters, they are ripped.
Yeah.
You look at highly anaerobic athletes who are doing lots of interval stuff, they're ripped and they're holding on to plenty of muscle mass for the rest of us humans. Yeah. So they're not holding on to abnormal bodybuilder, huge muscle mass, but they're holding on to plenty. Rugby players,
NFL players, running backs. Like you look at the 100 metre sprinters, there's not an ounce of fat amongst them.
Yeah. So I think if you clear that the idea that the percentage is not really as relevant as the actual amount of fat burnt.
And also just because you're burning glycogen doesn't mean that glycogen isn't going to be, like, people tend to think of exercise in isolation, like, well, I've exercised for this many minutes, but that many calories. There's a flow-on effect through the rest of your day, which I think is really important. Yeah. The idea that when you're steady state, you work at 50 or 65% of your VO2 max, which is when you're in that sort of 50-50 carbs and fats burning zone, fat burning zone. When you're working in that zone, the exercise ends and there's no real epoch or excessive post-oxygen consumption. So you finished...
You've got a big debt to pay back.
Yeah, 2 minutes later you're recovered, your breath's back to normal, your metabolism's kind of leveled out. When you do intervals, you're going up and down, you play sport and you're going up and down, up and down. Afterwards your body goes like, whoa, that was an assault, and it has to do a lot of work recovering that. That's when you burn a lot of fat. So there's that after exercise effect, that afterburn effect that people talk about, which is just as powerful, if not more, when you talk about intervals.
And remind me to circle back to... No, I'll do it now because I'll forget. So no, I'm going to go back. Sorry, jumping around. I think the important thing to emphasize is that it's not just only do intervals. Yeah. Like, I think steady state has a really important place, because if you're doing the high intensity interval stuff, it has a really strong hormonal cost. It's a systemic.
It's because it's so high intensity. There's a big neural demand as well.
Yeah.
So you can't do it. You can't just go intervals and get all your results that way. But if you're doing nothing, or you're doing very low levels, adding some of that is a big trigger to get stuff rolling. And
it's still appropriate to do a bit of everything. So, for instance, it might be that you do 6 workouts a week, 2 lifts, 2 interval cardios, and 2
lifts, 2 intervals, and then
2 steady state. Because the steady state can form a situation where you're kind of getting a bit of active recovery from the hard work.
So flushing through some metabolites, getting some blood flow through the legs, helping promote recovery.
Yeah. And you're also able to do it for longer, so you can amass a larger amount of total fat burnt.
Yeah.
So it might be that you're doing 2 45-minute walks, 2 20-minute cardios, and 2
high-intensity cardios.
And 2 45-minute lifts. And that's a really nicely balanced program. I think the really big thing, so there's the post-exercise oxygen debt stuff, the EPOC stuff. Yep. That's really important. But the elephant in the room is that people, because of the central governor, which is a preservation mechanism that exaggerates how hard exercise feels.
Yeah. So the central governor works based on, takes your past experience, your current rate of perceived. So I've run a 400 meters before. It felt like that. It's a little hotter today, and I'm a little tired, and I'm running at this pace. I'm going to modulate your energy levels to keep you so that you don't die before the finish line, basically. And so that's the central governor.
And I think it's particularly at play with steady state stuff, where people will really hold back from their threshold. So people really pace themselves a lot. The beauty of interval work is that you actually get people who might otherwise pace themselves heavily, who actually push their capacity, push the envelope a little bit. So it's not just that physiologically it's the amount of calories you're burning and from fat. It's also you'll just work harder, and you're able to kind of sort of circumnavigate that.
That's central governor. So you can sort of cheat it a bit by doing up and downs, because 8 and 12, for example, 8 seconds I get to rest very short.
And anyone can work hard for 8 seconds. Even like certified wusses.
Especially on the bike.
Yeah.
Where there's no technical demands, just get in there, turn the gear up, pedal fast.
Yeah. Not for everyone, not for every age. So I'm 43 and I let myself slip a little bit the last year, and I'm easing back into it. I'm not doing intervals yet. I'm just wanting to just get my heart actually just working for 20 to 40 minutes at a moderate intensity. So it's appropriate that people ease their way in and build a base for their hearts rather than just asking to suddenly start hammering.
Yeah.
But I think that misguided idea of people like, oh, careful you don't burn more fat. Like don't do running, you'll burn less fat. It's like, no, you'll burn more.
There's also I suppose this will probably be one of our last topics, muscle fiber type. When you do copious amounts of steady state or lower intensity work, you have an enzymatic and hormonal shift in the body, which shifts you from a type 2 anaerobic power, burn lots of energy, be very metabolically taxing, like demanding for the body, into more of an aerobic, be as conservative as possible, hold on to your stores.
You're training your body to be more efficient.
You're training your body to be skinny fat.
Yeah.
And so, you see those images on Google all the time. What would you prefer, to be a sprinter's body or a marathon's body? Now, not to say marathons aren't incredibly, efficient and powerful athletes,
sure.
But for the general population,
and some people might want to look like a marathon. That's totally their thing.
But if your goal is to do as little exercise and maintain life for as long as possible, you need balance.
Yeah.
A bit of everything. You can't just steady state your way out of all your fat.
Yeah.
In the same way you can't,
And also, there's a sort of a vigor component. If you're only doing steady state, you're not actually making yourself much fitter. I think there's a component there where
you're kind of working on the system. You're kind of working in the system, not on it.
You're not expanding it.
You're just doing work. You're not developing. You're not improving fitness, improving capacity, improving toughness.
Yeah.
For those wusses.
Sounds like we're like boot camp guys. And some people there'll be people watching and say no, the bodybuilders say and it's like, well, look at CrossFit. So CrossFit has 99 problems, but
fat burning is not one of them.
But those guys are ripped, and the girls are ripped, and no one's saying of the girls, oh my gosh, she can't hold on to her muscle mass. They've got plenty of muscle mass, and the guys and the girls, and they are almost exclusively they're not doing heaps of steady state stuff. I mean, they're a bit of high-end ergo stuff.
But it's still on that threshold work. It's not like cruise at 65%, 50% stuff. It's sub-threshold. It's on that lactate inflection point, on that anaerobic threshold type level where they're pushing the envelope. So even when they're doing the endurance work, the endurance stuff it's
high-end.
It's dipping into anaerobic the whole time, and then it's often following up from something crazy, some crazy resistance-based circuit before that.
Yes, I think that they're one of the most, because they're one of the most shining examples, because you can't, you got to be careful too much of, well, sprinters look like this. Oh, I want to get a swimmer's body. People are like, I want that broad-shouldered, big-footed swimmer's body. No, they're good at swimming because...
Yeah, they didn't grow big feet because they started swimming. They had big feet, got good at swimming, and they kept swimming.
Yeah. But I think CrossFit actually provides a really good illustration of that benefit.
Let's end there. That was not an advocation of CrossFit.
It's an advocation of the benefits of interval stuff.
Yep.
You can do the CrossFit if you want. It's totally cool. It's your thing. But
high intensity intervals for a better bang for your buck for your fitness and fat burning.
Nice.